Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the common uses of the UNA-GAUGE with a router. One of the obvious things, the first thing is going to be setting the depth of your router bit. In this case, bring it right on the base. So now I'm measuring from the flat base of the router to the end of the bit, so I get a very accurate reading. For instance, if I wanted to cut this 3/8 of an inch deep, bring it on there, bring it up to my 3/8 of an inch, lock my router in place. Just to simply flip the UNA-GAUGE on its back, and I can set the fence or the edge guide of the router as well. If I wanted it at 5/8 of an inch, I'd turn it back to 5/8 of an inch, lock it in place. Now I'm ready to cut a rabbit that's exactly 5/8 wide and 3/8 of an inch deep. Now, even if you're using a profile bit, it's just as easy to adjust it using the UNA-GAUGE. Here, this is sometimes difficult with a simple roundover bit just because you're right at the edge of that bit that you're trying to set flush with the bottom of the base. So in this case, I just bring the tip, my contact tip, very close to the end of the carbide, and I can adjust it right up and see right where I'm at, get it flush, or maybe go just a few thousandths past so that I don't dig in at all. Now, by reconfiguring the legs, the position of the legs on the UNA-GAUGE, I can get down on surfaces as narrow as a small laminate trimmer. Now in this case it might be a little bit more difficult to read just because I have to turn the indicator sideways to get between the legs. But I can still very accurately adjust and see where my adjustments are at. Now if you ever use templates or guides with your router, for instance here I've got a Festool edge guide. If my router was going to be riding up on that edge guide, what I would do is simply take my UNA-GAUGE, set it right on top of the guide, zero it out there, and now when I go back to my router, I've already compensated for the thickness of this gauge, of the edge guide, and I don't have to do any calculations, just simply set to the depth I want from the base of the router, and that distance is compensated for. To move over here to the router table, one of the things I've done here is we've installed our router and drill press spindle adapter, and then taken the legs off the UNA-GAUGE and just mounted it across the router table. So one of the things you want to do is check that, and that will check to see if your router is perpendicular with your table. If it's not, and you have matching cutters, for instance if you're making raised panel doors and you're coping pattern cutters, if that's not square, they're not going to match properly. So take the time, it's a one-time deal, shim the base of the router so that it fits the way it should, or it's perpendicular the way it should be, and make sure that your bits perform as best they can. I'll bring this up. Now, another thing to do is to check the runout. Sometimes if you're working on a non-metallic surface and you want to hold the UNA-GAUGE real secure, just simply clamp it in place. And if I bring this up to my spindle adapter, lock my fence down. Now it's a real simple matter to check the runout of my router collet. Now if I move over here to this router table, it's just as easy to set the depth on a router table as it is with the router itself. In this case, I'm going to set this up, and on this UNA-GAUGE we've installed the offset point. I'll show you what that's for. In this case, let me turn this so you can see a little better. But if I were going to set this for a very limited depth of cut, let's say maybe 3/32 of an inch. Bring this up. Got my height set. And the reason for using the offset tip is now when I go to set my fence, that will bring the tip down right close to the surface of the table. So I can still pick that bit up. So I bring it in, whatever setting I wanted. Lock my fence down. Now another thing you might do with a router table is offset your fences so you're doing more of a jointing or a full edge cut. So my bit would be extended up to make a full cut. Now, if I offset fences, I want to set that bit perfectly flush with the outfeed fence. So I take my UNA-GAUGE, bring it up against the fence, and just adjust it over until it's perfectly flush. Now, typically with the router bit, you'll find that if you set it that close, it won't cut quite properly. You probably want to set it so it's sticking out just a couple of thousandths of an inch because that bit will deflect when you start cutting and putting a heavy load on it.